Hello and welcome to the 11th episode of the Pirate Rugby Pod. And thank you to our 190 YouTube subscribers. We'd love to get to 200 by the next time we talk to you. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you leave us a comment, we always respond. So let us know what you think. Over to you, Hugh.
Don't forget that you can also listen to the audio version of this pod on both Apple and Spotify. Our last podcast was our most listened to audio yet. If you want to be part of the journey, please come along. If you drop us a review, it also helps out a lot as well. We also have a Substack that you can subscribe to completely for free, where you'll get all of our content in your inbox as soon as we release it. Today, we've put out a list of our top 5 hidden gems of the Rugby World Cup, the players who have performed fantastically well, but perhaps aren't getting the credit they deserve. So if you want to see that list, a link to it will be in the description below. Anyway, let's talk about this week's rugby. And Enda, you can introduce us to our wonderful guest.
Yeah, now that's out of the way, we're delighted to introduce our guest for this week. You may know him as Rugby Kino on Twitter, a man with a degree in statistical analysis, Cian O Muilleoir. Did I pronounce that correctly, Cian?
Yeah, that's about as close as you're going to get.
How are you, mate?
Not too bad at all. Kind of just surviving between trips back and forth to France. So, it's a struggle, but I'll have to cope with it somehow.
Have we got your degree right? Is it a degree in statistical analysis?
It's actually it's a master in data analytics.
Okay.
But it's pretty close. Yeah, same ballpark.
You did your final project on rugby, didn't you? Is that right?
Yeah, it was rugby data, but it ended up being a look at a specific type of analysis and whether it worked for really detailed rugby data, and TLDR it doesn't. So, but that still counts as research. If you have a hypothesis and you prove it not to be correct, it's still valid. So,
well, I'll try and not just ask you questions all night about the thing, because I can talk about dates for all the time, but. We have a schedule, so let's move on and talk about our rugby moments of the week, starting with yourself, Enda.
Yeah, just wanted to touch on Peter O'Mahony reaching 100 caps. He seems to, I think he's in the absolute form of his life. He's been brilliant in the game of the weekend. I think he made at least 2 line-out steals. He's just a phenomenal player. Of course, there was a scrap in the game. Of course, Peter O'Mahony was in the middle of it, scrapping absolutely everybody. He's always there, and I think that's what the players love about him as well. And apparently he's a really big character in the change room, and you can just see the amount of respect with all the interviews there have been this week and over the weekend, that the amount of respect current and former players have for him. So just thought it was important to mention him, and of course his interview after the game, which is just classic Peter O'Mahony, where he basically called out the Scots, because some Scots had allegedly said that they Scotland had figured Ireland out and that they were going to end Ireland's winning streak, but we all saw what happened there. So yeah, he's just a legend of the game, I think. I know that term is thrown around quite easily, but he really is. And he just completely justifies the selection. Like there was a period there where a lot of people in the Irish media were questioning why he's been picked, but I think we're really starting to see it in this World Cup why he is such a valued member of the team. But yeah, shout out to Peter O'Mahony. I'm sure he's listening.
Of course he is.
What about yourself, Hugh?
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here, because I did have a couple noted down, but as soon as I saw this, I had to go with this. So can you see that? Tell me when you can see.
Just coming through now.
There we go.
Yep.
There we go. Right. Now we don't.
You have to describe it for our audio listeners as well.
We don't condone violence, but what I'm showing on the screen, and the audio listeners, jump on the YouTube and have a look and give us an extra view. What we have here is similar to what you mentioned there, mate. A bit of a set 2 between the Georgian players and the Welsh players from the weekend. A bit of a Barney in the second half. What I'd like to draw your attention to is this guy here. This is Tain Basham. Okay, the guy right in the thick of it here. So I don't know if you can see this. In his right arm, he's got one Georgian player here, outstretched at arm's length. In his left arm, he's got another Georgian player here. And then he's lying on top of a third Georgian. So Tain Basham, who is, by the way, as far as I can tell, the smallest back rower at the World Cup, is fighting 3 Georgians at the same time in this photograph. That is stupendous effort from him, and yeah, making Wales captain for life off the back of this for me.
Yeah, it's like the Caravaggio's Taking of Christ, but with rugby players instead of Roman soldiers.
Yeah. And you got, I think Rio Dyer's in here just to try and not get him sent off because they're Dragons teammates. I'm sure he knows what he likes. Anyway, so that's mine. How about yourself, Cian?
Yeah, I didn't have to think long about this one because I did already definitely have a favorite moment, and it might not be everyone's favorite moment, but it was certainly mine. It was Mike Tadger's Majestic Funt, which also happens to be the name of my next garage band. That the track back and the little heads up scan of the field. He knew he had the time, and then the form and the follow through. You could practically see the boom lines coming off the back of that ball as it made like easily 40 meters. It was a beautiful touch finder. Absolutely like any out half, any fullback would be any scrum half if they could kick it that far would be absolutely delighted with that touch finder.
It was when you see him running back, you're thinking, who is that running back? He's not the shape that I was expecting to see running back. And then he gets it, and you're right, it's the minute he picks up the ball and he's got it in two hands. And he takes a breath and he looks to the side and he just picks his spot and just.
He was judging the wind and everything. I think he was just weighing up all the hops.
Never doubt the self belief of a front row player. Like they can do anything.
They'll all have you believe that in a different world they'd be a fly half. Like I'm a fly half, really. Yeah, brilliant stuff.
Yeah, that's literally every front row I've ever met has told me that.
So, well, we've got you with us, Cian. So you were, as you said, in Paris at the weekend, taking in Ireland versus Scotland. So Enda was in Paris a couple of weeks ago, taking in Ireland versus South Africa, and then I was in France as well. So why don't you tell us about your experience, how you found it, what you've made of France as hosts of the World Cup so far?
Look, France, in my opinion, France, and by extension Paris, is simultaneously one of the most amazing and frustrating places you'll ever visit. For example, I had a couple of brilliant meals there, but God forbid you try to eat lunch after 2 p.m. or even worse, after 11 p.m. At night is even worse. Like I ended up after the South Africa match eating pizza out of a robot kiosk oven. It sounded like a great idea at the time, but it tasted like it was designed by a robot and constructed out of cardboard. Likewise, I had a brilliant time chatting with opposition fans. Sat out on the terrace and the bar tables in the sunshine. The amicable owner coming out, offering out a round of free pasties on the house. It was amazing. And then you get to the other end of the night and you're spending 12 quid on €12 per pint. And there's 200 supporters and there's one bathroom for everyone. And somehow the road is sticky. You've never had sticky road before, but there it is. The stadium experience for me was equally kind of schizoid. The queues for the food, the drink, the bathrooms, the merch, they're all huge. They're everywhere. The staff seem that they've been trained about 5 minutes before the gates have opened. Things were running out everywhere and electricity had gone in all over the place and no food here, no beer there. But then you get inside the stadium and the actual match atmosphere I thought was just incredible. In all three games I've been to, I thought the match atmosphere was amazing. Honestly, like nothing I'd been to before. The stadia are all really well suited to live rugby, really cauldron-like, nice tall edges on the sides, really funnel that sound in. You're never very far from I don't have particularly expensive tickets, but I never felt like I was very far from the pitch. And everyone's into the match. Everyone is into the match. There's no one's there on their phones. There's no one chatting about, mortgage rates or insurance. Everyone's watching, roaring, gasping, singing. I even joined in a Mexican wave. I swore I'd never join in a Mexican wave in a stadium, but there I was, jumping out of my seat like a fool for it. And I don't think it was limited to the Irish matches either. I think the atmosphere looked amazing across the board at any of the matches that I was watching. As we said, from an Ireland point of view, the results don't hurt. But yeah, that's pretty much it from my point of view.
It sounds very similar to mine. Like I was at that box game, Cian, and like I've never experienced an atmosphere like it. And one of the people who was with me was in his 60s. He's like, it was the best sporting occasion ever been like we, and similar to you, like we got to the stadium so early, and then like during the game, every single decision we were like, if South Africa knocked on the ball, we were out of our seats just roaring, and so it just felt like the rest of the stadium was too. And we could have stayed there all night as well after kickoff, just singing. And everyone just smiling and taking photos. It was incredible.
that was a singular experience in my life, let alone rugby. That was something special. It really was.
It seems like everyone turned up for a rendition of Zombie, and there was a rugby match as a warm up for it.
It is the fastest rugby match that I've ever been to. I've never had 80 minutes go by on me so quickly. No idea where the time went.
Yeah, that's always a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so while we've got a man of your qualifications with us, Cian, I think it's worth milking you for all you're worth and getting you to talk to us about some stats. So let's pull up some of the graphs that you shared me. Anybody who knows me knows that I get excited by a graph. So I was very excited when you were sharing some of these. So let's have a quick look then. So sharing. You'd think I'd be faster at this now. How long were we doing this? Ta-da. Right. Oh, no, that's the running notes. That's a glimpse behind the curtain. Right.
There we go.
There we go. Right. So here's a graph that you've sent me. This is about showing how well or disappointingly teams have performed in the pool stage. Do you want to talk us through a bit about how this graph is arrived at and what it tells us?
Yeah, absolutely. This was inspired both by you inviting me on this podcast and your love of all things Tier 2, and Simon Leave's amazing work on the handicap plus minus overperformance stats he started doing about 2 weeks in, I think. So what he was doing was taking the recording the handicap beforehand for each of the matches and seeing how consistently or how well the teams were doing over or under the handicap as they went along. And I mean, it was brilliant because it levels the playing field in essence. It's the same for Portugal as it is for South Africa. When you use the bookies handicaps like that, but I wanted to take it to take it up a level, and I had a look at the standard deviation as well to see how reliably the teams performed at those under or over performance levels. It makes more sense now as I go through it. So what you have here is a chart with essentially 4 quadrants of performance. To the right of the center line, you've got over performance, and to the left you've got under performance as per the handicaps. So you're scoring more than the handicap expected you to, you're going to be getting pluses in that axis, and if not, you could be getting minuses. On the horizontal, on the perpendicular axis, you've got the standard deviation. Now, the larger the standard deviation, the further away your scores are on average from each other, if that makes any sense.
There's a big discrepancy between each score. So you're scoring like
on
10
average
in one game and 50 in another.
It's the average difference between all your between all your differences to the handicap, if that makes any sense whatsoever at this point. I'm sure I've lost about 90% of the audience at this point. So say you score 2 above the handicap in each match, you're going to have a very low variance, but you're also going to have a low score above handicap. So it's a matter of trying to balance the 2 out. They're both important. For anyone who can actually see this, for example, New Zealand and France are both quite high on the plus difference to handicap because New Zealand especially had a couple of big blowouts, but because they lost the first match and because the difference was between the blowouts and the losses so huge, they're actually quite high on the standard deviation, whereas Ireland are really low on the standard deviation and still fairly high on the plus to the handicap because they've actually beaten the handicap in all 4 matches. And they've done it fairly consistently across all 4.
Which is impressive because they would have been plus, as in they would have been expected to win all of their games anyway, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they were on a negative, with the handicap as negative to adjust back down your score towards 0. So I can get that here on the fly, I'm pretty sure. Just take a moment. No, not at all. I'm used to this. Precious for tires. So I'll have to look at it up twice. But the handicap was 63 against Romania, and that got beaten by 11 points. It was 82 was the score, 82-8, I should say. 36 was the handicap against Tonga, and that was beaten by 7. was 59-16. And then the handicap was 12 against Scotland, and that was beaten by 10. And then against South Africa, they would not have had the handicap in their favour. I don't think Ireland were favourites for that game.
Really?
No, South Africa were favourites for that game, and Ireland won 13-8, so they came out 6 points ahead on that.
Wow. Okay. I would have thought Ireland would be favourites for that game. I disagree with the bookies on that one.
Yeah, bookies love South Africa. Historical Rugby World Cup results go a long way still.
I'd love to talk to a bookies handicap generator person once to understand that all that goes into it, because it can't just be data. It has to be things like history. It has to be things like gut feel and stuff has to be in there. It must be fascinating discussion to be a part of.
And then there's the market rebalancing. The more money goes into it, the more it'll change the odds, and you got to take the 10% off for the house. I think it's about 10% usually. So
cool. Anyway, so as we said, France and New Zealand are the ones who overperformed, but perhaps slightly unreliably. Ireland performed better, but reliably. The team that's furthest to the right on this graph is Portugal, who I think shocked us all, and of course beat our beloved Fiji in the last game. Enda, what's your... We were on Scoop Right on Sunday, and everyone was saying, yeah, assuming that Fiji beat Portugal, which they will, this is what's going to happen in the quarterfinals. And then it didn't happen. Do you have a view on, from a Fiji perspective, what went wrong?
Well, we know that they made a couple of changes, and actually just on that point as well, I think you tried to jump in at one stage on that pod by saying, well, they still have to play Portugal, and you were trying to make the point, and you were trying to make a valid point, it seems, because they'd made a couple of changes. And it just seemed like I think they probably underestimated Portugal for me watching them. Like they were just, but also like you can't take away from Portugal and how well they played and how fired up for it they were. Like Portugal overall have had quite a decent World Cup. I think like they have a draw and they've got a win now, and they seem to be building, which is great to see. But from Fiji's perspective, I think they potentially underestimated them, and I found them quite frustrating to watch. And I think I said this on Scoop as well, and like I'm a bit nervous about them from a completely neutral perspective going up against England. Like I really think England can do a job on Fiji if Fiji don't show up, and if they do force it, and if they do try to run the ball a lot, which we know they don't when they play those big games. We know that they're a mature side now. We know that they're not your typical or your stereotypical Fiji side of old, and that they will take their points when they're on offer. They will kick when it's on and everything. So. Yeah, hopefully they just put that game behind them and they move on. It's incredible that Australia still don't make it through now, which is, we've seen some, quite prominent people tweet about that. But we won't get into it. But look, I think Fiji just need to put that game behind them and move on, and hopefully we'll see what, like they've already beaten England this year, so they can definitely do a job on them. But they just need to put it behind them, I think.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. Yeah, I just quickly on Australia, I can see they're the furthest left, so they are the biggest underperformers apart from one. We had the one that
outside of Italy, they're the second lowest on the kind of minus 57 versus the handicap across all their matches.
We'll talk about Italy a little bit more in a few minutes, but Fiji, you can see, also underperformed. So this is where the underlying numbers, as John McKenzie of TIFO would call them, kind of are a bit different to the actual outcomes, because some would say that Fiji getting out of the pool in second place was an overperformance, but according to the handicap, they have underperformed. Cian, what's your kind of take on stats saying a team is doing badly, but the results say they're doing well?
I mean, everything is relative, I mean, to me, statistics are to illuminate truths that already exist. They're not an ends to and of themselves. So, they should inform decision making. They should inform the way you look at things, but they don't. No statistic will give you the whole picture, unless you're looking for a binary outcome. Like it won't happen. In terms of Fiji's performances, they only actually overperformed against Australia.
Really?
That was their only overperformance against the handicap. They were 12.5 points above the handicap in that game. Other than that, they've underperformed throughout.
So were
Underperformed
they
by
favourites to beat Wales then?
I would see you don't have to be the favourite to underperform. If you,
Okay.
that's
Because one thing I'll say whilst you're just looking that up is that I was looking at some data around penalties conceded in matches today. The game that the team that conceded the most amount of penalties and still won was Wales against Fiji. Wales conceded 17 penalties in that game to Fiji's 9, and Wales still won the match. So that kind of speaks to that is a massive outlier in terms of an outcome. I think the second highest penalty concession is still one is actually France versus Namibia, but that is, or it might be France versus Uruguay, but that would be where a discrepancy in teams means that the opposition doesn't have the opportunity necessary to give away the same number of penalties.
yeah, absolutely. It turns out, yeah, Wales had a handicap of 5 and they won by 6. So
There you go. There you go.
Against Australia, yeah, they managed to. There was a 5.5 point handicap for Australia there, and Fiji, of course, managed to win that one. But it was against the other kind of, we say tier 2, I think it's probably fair, teams, Georgia and Portugal. I mean, obviously, Portugal, we all know that result. But I mean, the handicap against Georgia was 18 points for Fiji. And they only won it by 5. And the handicap was 20 points against Portugal, and they lost it by a point. So they really, going by the market, I suppose is probably the best way to put it. Going by the market, they've underperformed almost across the board, except against Australia.
Wow, that's fascinating. I think looking at some of the other teams that are in here in terms of overperformers, one of the overperformers, according to the handicap, and reliably overperforming is Samoa. And they have finished 4th in their pool, and they've gone home. But we said it on a different pod. Samoa will be kicking themselves because I think they had the minerals to get out of this pool, and I think they'll be thinking back on a lot of regrets. What have you made of their performance in Pool D in what turned out to be the weakest pool of the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the handicap rankings, they're 8th in the handicap rankings with plus 20, which is actually quite a decent return. They're 9th in the standard deviation rankings, so actually quite an even keel with those. They beat the handicap in 3 games. They were plus 1 on Chile, plus 7 on Argentina, plus 21 on England, and minus 9 against Japan. They did get the 2 bonus points as well, which is reflected in that kind of standard deviation being quite low. They finished with the highest log points of any team in 4th place, and they were actually they really felt like they could have gotten out of that pool. It was there was the match against Japan really, which I thought they could have won on another day, which I think cost them ultimately. But yeah, the match against England was the one that got away. They should have won that game. I have no idea how they didn't win that game. Yeah, that's the killer. But they really had an opportunity against Japan as well. They could have been 2 up on where they were.
Yeah.
But that's the vagaries of sport.
Well, that's why we play the games, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose rather than just agree it beforehand, like this team should win. I mean, Japan is another one that's massively well, not massively overperformed, but reliably overperformed. And we looked at where they were after the Pacific Nations Cup, with them losing to Samoa and then getting pretty handily beaten by Fiji, and really struggling against Tonga at times as well. And have the stories of Japan's demise been greatly exaggerated?
I hope so. Like, the only thing is, like we've touched on it before, like we haven't seen them progress. Like, I think we were all hoping they'd make it through, and they haven't made it through this. Like you can't remember like the last World Cup. You can't forget, like, they beat Scotland, they beat Ireland. They made it through, and they, I think they surprised everyone, especially and like it was brilliant to see, especially after that massive win they had over the Box in 2015 as well. So this year, I don't know what I don't know what the issues are in Japanese rugby. Like, there's a lot of talk about they've changed this name all the time. So what is it now? It's the League One Rugby, is it? I think it's the official title in
League One Rugby.
Japan League One.
Their football competition is also called Japan League One. So if you just Google Japan League One, it will come up with soccer before it comes up with rugby, which is a nightmare.
Yeah, it reminds me of Major League Rugby as well in the UK or in the US, just to confuse matters even more. But anyway, so we don't know, obviously, like the Sunwolves are no longer there, and how much has that impacted? Like, I think famously, the coach of Japan came out after they'd beaten Ireland and said they've been planning this for years.
Yeah. And
they were able to have that cohesion, especially because the majority of them were playing for the same club. So is that the issue? I don't know, but I think it was still, like, especially in that, we did see them put in some good performances. They're still trying to play that exciting brand. I just don't know if they progressed since the last World Cup, and I think that's disappointing. And hopefully they can push on from here. But it's great to see them, and Jamie Joseph is leaving as well, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that change in leadership as well.
Oh, the big man Eddie Jones is coming back, isn't he?
Could be. Well, I think they've denied those rumors.
The rumor mill is grinding very hot at the moment. Very, very hot.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting, isn't it? And of course, the rumor is that their man Fiji are going to be added to the Rugby Championship now, and it's going to be more like a Six Nations of the South, which is well overdue, in my opinion. Yeah. Well overdue.
Yeah. That is fantastic. I'm really, really happy about that. The other possible coaching assignment, possibly not so much.
Yeah. So, Cian, I'm going to ask you about Scotland in a second to get your numbers on the screen. So yeah, from my point of view, like I said, Japan needed to get into the Rugby Championship. I think it had gotten a little bit stale as a competition, especially the teams playing each other, if not twice, then 3 times within the space of just a few months. That once you get a few years of that, it does tend to get a bit stale, in my opinion. But on to Scotland then. So, Cian, according to your numbers, Scotland overperformed in this World Cup. Where's that come from? Because they didn't lay a glove on either Ireland or South Africa. So how do we say that they're overperformers?
Yeah, the overperformance very simply came from the 2 matches in the middle. It's literally as simple and straightforward as that. They were 7th on the difference to handicap ranking, which you can see, yeah, it's fairly decent return in terms of the overperformers. But they were 13th in terms of the standard deviation ranking. A little bit unsteady because of those losses against South Africa and Ireland. They beat the handicap narrowly against Tonga, 5 points, and then really quite soundly against Romania with 29 points. Turns out that was their performance of the tournament. But yeah, they underperformed against Ireland by 10 points and South Africa by 4 points. That's what puts them in the volatile overperformers quadrant. So yeah, thank Ben Healy, Scotland. Thank Ben Healy for getting you there. I'm a Leinster supporter.
You're talking to an Irishman.
I'm a Leinster supporter, so I should say boo, boo, boo.
I'll be delighted to hear that.
But no, yeah, Ben Healy. I honestly thought it was a huge mistake for Scotland to go with the 6-2 split and to leave Ben Healy off the bench. That was my take on the day, and then they'd lose their backup 10 at fullback 5 minutes into the game, and that was good. That was it. That's good night. All she wrote. Then they had no out.
Yeah, knowing how much Munster people like to stick together, if Ben Healy had come onto the pitch for Scotland, maybe Peter O'Mahony and Keith Earls would have pulled on blue jerseys and started playing for the other team just to back their guy. Right, so who else shall we talk about here? Enda, I've been mean to Scotland a lot, so it's your turn. What have you got to say about Scotland that hasn't already been said?
They had a really tough draw. Like, they were in a pool, like, basically the 2 best teams in the world. Like, if they had been on the other side of the draw, I think they would have done better. They probably would have made it through to the quarters at least. Like, we can get into it in terms of why Scotland are maybe where they're at, but I think they're a good side. I really do. I just think Ireland are definitely better, and South Africa are definitely better as well. And they just got unlucky with that draw, I think. But like we've talked about them a lot, and they have some really good players, which Ireland just completely outperformed them, which they've been doing for years now. I don't think there's much more that we haven't said about Scotland, is there? I don't know about you, Cian, if you have any other thoughts, but we've talked about them a lot. I think on a day they can actually beat anybody, but I also think the following week they could lose, against Italy. and no disrespect to Italy, but they're consistently inconsistent for me.
Yeah.
And they just can't seem to get one up on Ireland.
Yeah, I think volatility is kind of the key. Maybe it was the Scotland match, the match against Scotland, that put this in my head as a measure for this, is the volatility. Because yeah, I mean they can run hot and they can run cold, and oftentimes the only difference is what's in their own heads about the opposition, it seems. In fairness, it was a very tough draw, and yeah, it's going to be hard for anyone to put one over against South Africa or Ireland at the moment. But they showed little in either of those games, other than that kind of back-to-back flash 2 tries against Ireland. There was no go forward. There was no real semblance of a danger in attack, even when they were camped out in that 22 for what seemed like 15, 20 minutes. It never really felt like they were going to score, and that's, for a side that lives and dies by the attacking sword, that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, when Wales have been at their best, that's how it's felt like when we've been on defence as well. It's like, keep running at us. We're not going to let you in. What was it like in the stadium when Scotland scored those 2 tries? Was there a moment of, ooh, this is
no,
or...
it was a polite cricket clap. The game had been over 20 minutes at that stage, I think. Like, they'd already taken Sexton off, and I think the Irish bomb squad had come on at that point. Although, linking anything in terms of Ireland and bomb squad is probably a bad idea. So, we'll just call them replacements.
We'll cut that one out.
It's all right. I'm allowed to say it.
The last thing I'll say on Scotland is that they finished with a positive points difference of plus 75 and a positive try difference of plus 11 tries, and finished third in their pool. So that kind of tells you that it was a pool of 2 halves, and Scotland was sat right in the middle of it. So finally, our worst performers on this list. Yeah, it's not Romania, it's not Namibia, it's not Chile, it's Italy, which I think a lot of us are very disappointed at. I think, does anyone have any kind of theories about why it went so badly wrong for them?
Several. I honestly thought against New Zealand, they got inside their own heads. It was that second try off of the maul in quick succession where I could almost visibly see them go, oh shit, we're playing the All Blacks. And just, they stopped tackling. They stopped attending breakdowns. I mean, like, they still went through the motions, but there was no spark of vibrancy. And frankly, they've had some issues with defense and breakdown work. They've improved their attack immensely, but those issues haven't gone away, and they got really, really horribly highlighted against a rampaging France and a rampaging New Zealand. It's a tough one. It really is. I mean, they had moments of brilliance. Like, they showed exactly what they can do in attack in those 2 tries against Italy. Capozzo and Eoni. Like, they were 2 magnificent tries.
Yeah. What about yourself, Andy? Have you got any kind of thoughts on what they got wrong? Is there something you can say, this thing here, they made this mistake?
It's hard to know if this was, like, if there was something, like, again, it's so simple, but like, it was a horrible group as well, up against the hosts and against New Zealand. So for me, like, I can forgive them for this. Like, it was bloody tough for them. Like, we know they've got superstars. We know, like, in my opinion, they're improving. Benetton are improving. The other 20s are excellent. Like, it's not, I hate this. Everyone's talking about the demise of Italian rugby, and we should just kick them out of the Six Nations and all this. But I think they were just dealt a really tough group, and they put in some poor performances. Did Kieran Crowley's, it was announced before the tournament that he was going to be replaced after that play on the players' minds. I was listening to another podcast on the bus home today, and I did hear that the reason the Mara was pulled off was after, I think it was 3 or 4 minutes into the second half. Allegedly, he was part of some sort of coup, and he was calling for Kieran Crowley to be removed. Don't know how true that is. It could be complete nonsense, but I did hear it on quite a reputable pod, so that was quite interesting. So I don't know, but for me, like, overall, they were just in a really tough group, and they put in some poor performances. Maybe they just didn't have the belief in themselves, knowing they're playing the hosts in the All Blacks. But for me, I don't think this is crisis mode for Italy. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll pull through. Like, they have some absolute superstars. Let's move on, and let's not talk overly negatively about Italy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. They got a really young squad. I mean, it's 24. Their 33-man squad. It's their first World Cup, and they have an average overall age of 26. Like, that's a very naive squad. And I mean, it shows the only team they actually beat the handicap on was Namibia. Uruguay actually best of the handicap by 2 points on them.
Really?
So yeah.
That's interesting, because a lot of people thought that Uruguay had a chance of winning that game.
Yeah,
It's interesting, these things, isn't it? For me, we talk about the superstars. The thing that they got wrong, in my opinion, and this can be put at Crowley's feet, is what they were doing with their 10, 12, 15. Like, in the first game, they went Garbisi 10, Marisi 12, Allen at 15. Allen has played 8 times at 15 in his career, up to today, and 6 of those have come in the last 12 months. So he's been thrust into this fullback position. He's only played 15 in back-to-back games twice in his career. So he played 2, I think, at the end of last year and 2 in the Six Nations this year. And he's suddenly playing in the World Cup at 15. But it's not like that's because Kapowitzo was injured. Kapowitzo was on the pitch. He was at 14. But he's the exciting new talent. And then in the next game, they moved Allen back to fly half and brought Garbisi back from 10 back to 12. And then Kapowitzo back to 15. That was against Uruguay, I think. And then for the new All Blacks game, went back to their first one, Garbisi, Marisi, Allen, Kapowitzo on the wing. And then for the last game, Allen, Garbisi, Kapowitzo again. It's like, what's the plan here, Kieran? One of these is what went so well against Namibia that you thought it was a good idea against the All Blacks, but it wasn't good enough for Uruguay? Like, I don't get it. And if you've got a player like Kapowitzo, players like Garbisi, you want these guys on the ball as much as possible. So I don't understand. If you don't think Allen's the guy, don't play him or put him on the bench or something. Yeah, just bizarre for me. Anyway, so I think that's an interesting look at your numbers there, Cian. Thank you so much for sharing these. It's really interesting to see. The one thing I just want to touch on before we leave it: are England overperforming?
Statistically, I'll go through it now. They've actually beaten the handicap in 3 of their games. Yeah. So that's 16 point over performance against Argentina. A 1 point over performance in their second game, which was, let's say the third. I think that was Japan. Sorry, yeah, 1 point over performance against Japan, 22 point over performance against Chile, and then a whopper minus 21 underperformance then against Samoa in their last game. But they have 2 decent over performances in there, albeit one of them against Chile, who, unfortunately every group seems to have its whipping boy, and unfortunately Chile was that one's. But Argentina contributed to it as well. This is one of the issues with these things, is it's very one-sided. You just see the points difference come through. You don't see the fact that Argentina played absolutely horribly that day.
Yeah, absolutely. The stat for England that surprised me was they've got the best defence of the World Cup so far, conceding 3 tries, 2 shutouts, 2 games with no tries conceded. Although the context to that as well is the context that you have to give is 3 of the 5 teams in Pool D conceded less than 10 tries in the whole pool stage, and Chile conceded 30. So there, as you said, Cian, there's Chile skewing the stats in that pool quite a bit. I described them on another pod as a zombie of a team, that they're the undead rugby team. Then they just keep coming, and you can't kill them. Ender, is that a legit description in your opinion?
I think so. I think you're right. And look, we've touched on this before. It's disappointing for me, I think, seeing every World Cup cycle hammerings. I really don't think it's healthy for the game. But in terms, just touching on England as well, I think they're definitely overperforming. It's great to back that up, but like winning is like they've got momentum there. I kind of quietly, secretly, admire what England are doing. They're just playing the worst brand of rugby, but they're just sticking to it. They're buying into it, and here they are in a quarterfinal against Fiji, who they could easily do a job on. It's just crazy to think that England could be in a World Cup semi-final in 2 weeks. Who would have said that before the World Cup? But I think, as neutrals, I think we're all shouting for Fiji, right? Especially on this spot, we are shouting for Fiji.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Right. So just to kind of add some extra stats to this. So we've been tracking the tier 2 teams because we're a tier 2 pod. And I just wanted to go through whether the numbers from what we've been looking at kind of matches up to what Cian's just shown us on this graph. And thankfully enough, they do. It's actually quite similar results. So I came up with my own little formula for coming up with the coefficient points. It's a bit like my attempt at a world rankings bit of maths. And I was really nervous when I first came up with it because the initial scores were coming through when people have played different amounts of games, and I was like, oh, this is starting to look a bit silly. But it's actually spat out something that kind of looks right. And I think, if something looks right, that's a long way to it being right.
100%.
So if it comes to ranking the tier 2 teams, now people disagree on what tier 2 is classed as. I've classed it as any team not in the Six Nations or the Rugby Championship. That's a very UK-centric view because we don't see those teams. I know Japan have a seat at the World Rugby Council, so some would call them tier 1. I know some people would call Fiji tier 1 now because they're in Super Rugby. This is my definition. If you disagree, that's allowed. We don't have to agree.
Yeah.
So, is it not showing my screen anymore? Hang on a minute. Might have to reconnect and reshare.
There we go.
Coming through.
Oh, no, actually, just go entire screen. You get a chance to look at your own faces there. That was good, wasn't it? It's not doing it. It's not doing it. Right, I'll just have to verbalize it. Okay, so Fiji are the top. I think that makes sense. So the tier 2 teams, Fiji are the best performers. They with Pirates rugby coefficient of 8.47. They get a whole extra heap of points for getting into the knockout stages, which for a tier 2 team is a fantastic achievement. Japan would be second, which I think some people might be surprised at. Oh, I'm back. I didn't even press anything.
There we go. Yeah, teams that like that.
Right. Okay. Cool. Fiji top, Japan second. So Japan scored the most points of anyone in the tier 2 teams. 110 points scored. Of course, we spoke about Chile skewing some of those metrics. 107 points conceded. They probably conceded a bit more to Argentina and England than they were expecting. But yeah, they came second. They narrowly beat out Samoa. So this is where, like, your graph, Cian, and my table here kind of says the same thing, is that even though Samoa finished fourth in their pool, they actually performed quite well, and all of their underlying numbers suggested that they are a good team. So for me, they've got to be gutted, and you get the sense from some of the interviews that the players were giving that this was their last hurrah. This was I'm not going to the next World Cup. This was my swan song, and I'm pretty gutted that I've underperformed. Portugal being fourth, I think that's no surprise based on the win that they got. And I think, again, on your graph, Cian, they overperformed quite well. And then Uruguay being the only other tier 2 team that got a win, kind of rounding out that group. The bottom 3, I think, makes a lot of sense as well. So Namibia are ranked bottom in my table, below Romania. I think that reflects the rankings of the teams that they were playing. Yes, Namibia were playing very good teams, but I think Romania were playing even better teams. And then Romania being second bottom, Chile being third bottom. And then you've got the 2 middle guys of Georgia and Tonga. And do we need to talk about Georgia? Why were people tipping them to get out of the group before the World Cup, and now they finished bottom of Pool C with no wins?
I think, I don't know. Like in some of the games that they played and that I watched, they played quite well. But I can't really, like, I haven't seen enough of them before. I didn't see enough of them before the World Cup. Like, a lot of people were kind of just like saying that they were going to do a lot better than they did, but I'm not sure if I necessarily saw that. But I think they're definitely an improving nation in terms of rugby. You do see high attendances at their games as well, which is great to see. I did read today as well that their coach is leaving. So will that lead to some change? I'm not sure.
So I think
but I'm not overly surprised
I think that's unsure at the moment. I
Is
think there's some stories that he's quit, and there's some stories saying that the stories of him quitting are untrue. So I'm not sure exactly what is accurate at the moment.
But yeah, I'm not overly surprised to see them there. Being honest with you.
Okay, cool. I just want to call out some of the individual performances in terms of point scorers and try scorers. So Matsuda is the top points scorer of anyone in Tier 2 with a really quite amazing 43 points in 4 games, all kicks. I don't believe he scored any tries. I'm pretty sure he didn't. So that kind of shows like what a difference he made. Like Japan would have not been with a shout of getting out this pool without him kicking those, and it kind of shows like someone like this is Uruguay, for example. Their top point scorer was a try scorer who didn't take any kicks. So that kind of shows how goal kicking in knockout rugby or tournament rugby, how important it is, and how you can look at the box and now the situation they find themselves in with Pollard. If you want to see a video, guys, about the debates between Lebock and Pollard, click on the pop-out banner here. See, now I have to learn how to do pop-out banners. Right. So yeah, Matsuda, huge for Japan. Havili quietly had a very, very good performance for Tonga as well. Him and Big Ben, for me, were their standout players. Havili, one of the few players who's actually in his 20s in that Tonga team. They're mostly a much older squad, so having him there. And he'd been playing fullback for Moana Pacifica all season, so to come in at fly half in a World Cup and perform how he did, it is impressive. And it's amazing when you look into the South Sea Island teams, just how many players they've got playing out of position, how they're moving people around to come cover other people, like Paiawa at fullback for Samoa, or no ender players for Tonga. Top try scorers, there was 5 players with 3 tries each. Obviously, Storty will be the superstar for Portugal, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts on Fakatava's try for Japan, the chip and chase, the one that none of us picked it as the moment of the week, and yet some people are saying it's the try of the tournament.
Yeah, I have to say I did. I was tempted, but I couldn't deny a funt. Like, tries and scored every day, but a funt is forever. But yeah, it was an incredible try. Did he mean it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking myself watching the replay.
I'm going to say yes, because it made for a beautiful try. So it's like, yeah, pure skill, absolutely meant it.
And he's never going to say anything different.
No, exactly. You're never going to find out any other way. The same way you can't prove intent for any of the head knock stuff or anything like that. You can't prove that he didn't mean to score that try.
That's a great argument. I remember, was it against Ireland? Stuart Hogg scored a try where the ball bounced in such a weird way, and it bounced in his hands, and he was through on the line. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to score a try." And he just did it. And it's like, yeah, just claim you meant it, Hoggy. Just claim you meant it. Anyway, that's enough stats. I think we've established who the under and overachievers of the pool stages are, and we can look ahead excitedly to the quarterfinals.
Just last thing on that, Matsuda scored just shy of 40% of Japan's points from his boot over the full pools. That's nuts.
That's amazing when you consider you think of Japan as a free scoring team who score a lot of tries.
I know, right?
Shows they're evolving, I suppose. Anyway, right. So, Ender, do you want to take us through some of our tier 2 roundups then, mate?
Yep, sure. And your video's gone, by the way. But see if you come back when you stop sharing. But I'll start going through these because we're just a bit tight for time. So let's go through. So English Premiership Cup, I should say. Coventry nearly beat Gloucester away from home. Ollie Thorley with a last minute try to seal it at 32-31. Coventry are a great team to watch. In terms of the NPC, we saw the quarterfinals this past weekend. So Canterbury beat Auckland to set up a semi-final with Taranaki after they beat Tasman. Wellington beat Waikato and will now face Hawke's Bay, who beat Bay of Plenty. In the Super Series, Irish remain top. Watsonians now second after beating the Bears. I also just wanted to touch on the AIL, so that's the All Ireland League, which started this weekend as well. There was one game broadcast for free on YouTube via the IRFU, and it's unclear, I think, how many games can be broadcast each weekend. It looks like it's going to be one at least on YouTube, which is great to see. But just for those of you who don't know what it is, the All Ireland League, so there are multiple divisions, but 1A is the top level. And it's essentially one level below the 4 provinces in Ireland. So you'll see a lot of academy players from the 4 provinces. You'll sometimes see like players who've been out with long-term injuries and they're trying to get up to speed. They will play some games. So you do see a number of players from each of the provinces play for various different teams. Looking at this past weekend.
Sorry, mate. Did I read there was a rule that only 2 senior players can play for an AIL team?
Yeah, no, I've never heard that. Cian, I know, have you heard? I do know that there was a rule previously where if you play for a province, you have to play for, like the team play for has to be either 1A or 1B. But I've never heard that. I don't know, Cian, if you heard that in different.
No, I don't think so.
Wikipedia letting me down.
I'd say some of them could be overrepresented, to be honest, as well. So.
Yeah. And looking at this past weekend, so Lansdowne are on top, no surprise there, and with Clontarf in second. But just moving on then, I just want also to mention to our viewers and listeners that the Gallagher Premiership is back this weekend. Now we are a URC equals best league podcast, but we will cover the Prem this year. So yeah, it starts this weekend. One thing I just wanted to call out, so there are games on TNT Sports in both Ireland and the UK. However, 2 games are exclusive to PR, so Premiership Rugby TV, and they have increased their prices this year for our viewers. So if you want to watch an individual game, this has gone up from $4.99 sterling to $5.99. The season pass has gone up 30 quid from 99 to 129.99, and they've also seemed to have gotten rid of the round pass that you could previously buy. So you could buy, say, a pass for a number of games per weekend. So I'm not sure if that's going to be back, but it definitely isn't available this week. And so that's one to keep an eye on. And then we also have the launch of the WXV, the new Women's International Tournament. So there are 3 versions of this, and it's 2 and 3 that start this coming weekend, including Ireland, who are playing Kazakhstan. And that game is going to be available on Rugby Pass TV. Because it's rugby, the broadcast rights are really confusing. So in England, all of England's games are going to be shown on ITVX, not on ITV's linear channels. And they're also going to show Wales games on ITVX. S4C are going to show the Welsh games on their linear channel, as well as S4C Click. And Scotland, there's no word, so that means that Rugby Pass TV will be the destination for all games. And it's the same in Ireland. Surprisingly, not any of the linear or traditional broadcasters have picked up the rights. So Rugby Pass TV, which is free, which is good, you'll be able to watch all the games there, so including Ireland's game this weekend. So you do have to sign up, but it is free. So there's the 2 things. Hugh, do you want us to take us through just the Rugby Europe conference?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Rugby Europe before, and obviously that's where the teams like Portugal and Georgia and Romania come from. What I didn't know until recently is there is a level even below that. Now, of course, there must be somewhere for those teams to play, but there is a Rugby Europe conference currently happening, and it's got a lot of teams in it. So it's split into 4 pools, and they include this. Pool A is Denmark, Finland, Latvia, Andorra. Pool B is Hungary, Luxembourg, Slovenia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. That one, which is 1 country. Pool C is Moldova, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Serbia. Moldova is where Dimitri Arhip is from, who was the former Ospreys and Cardiff tight head. And then Pool D is just Israel and Malta. No other 2. It's just two teams in that. So I'm not sure how that pool is working. I don't know if some countries aren't playing Israel for political reasons. I've got no idea.
Maybe.
I've got absolutely no idea, guys. Don't hold me to that. I know that there is an Israeli team in the Rugby Europe trophy. I'll tell you what, I'll ask my friend Francisco. He'll know. He knows everything. Right. So that's going on. I don't know if it's on TV at all, but we'll keep an eye on the scores and we'll let everybody know who wins. I'm going to say Moldova because I've heard of a rugby player from them. That's about as deep as it goes. Anyway, guys, I think that's pretty much all that we have to talk about this week.
So just for me, yeah, thanks everyone for listening and for tuning in, and a massive thanks to Cian for coming on. You've been a joy, you've been a pleasure, and we hope to see you back again. But really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, delighted, lads. Thanks a million for having me.
Cheers, guys. Have a great week, everybody.
Sorry, there we go.